I'm Mia, and I just turned 17. If you ask anyone who knows me, they'd say I'm quiet, maybe a little distant. But you'd be distant too if you grew up the way I did. My family has always been my parents, my older sister Jenna, and my grandmother, my safe haven. My parents, immigrants who built a stable life in a new country, love to remind us of their struggles. At the dinner table, they'd drone on and on about how hard things were when they first moved here. I didn't understand most of it when I was 10. It just felt like a constant guilt trip. Some nights, I'd fill up on snacks to avoid sitting through their repetitive lectures. Jenna, who's 2 years older than me, couldn't care less about my frustrations. Whenever I tried to bond with her, she brushed me off, telling me to mind my own business. At school, she acted like I didn't exist. At home, she bullied me into doing her chores. My parents never stepped in to help Dot. The only person who understood me was Grandma. She was this vibrant, warm-hearted woman who always let us have snacks, cooked our favorite meals, and shielded us from our parents' wrath. Well, she shielded me. Jenna never needed that kind of protection because, in my parents' eyes, she could do no wrong. She was their golden child. And I was just there. When I started high school, everything changed. Jenna was finishing up her last year and had her eyes set on a few prestigious colleges. Meanwhile, Grandma's health was declining rapidly. My parents tried everything, hospital visits, medication, but nothing worked. The day Grandma was hospitalized, my world crumbled. She was the only person who really saw me, and now she was fighting for her life. After a few weeks, Grandma's condition stabilized, but the doctors insisted she needed constant care. I immediately volunteered to look after her, but my parents shut me down, telling me to stay out of adult matters. Despite their good income, they claimed they couldn't afford a private nurse, so they decided to send Grandma to a senior care home. I was devastated. I begged, pleaded, and threw tantrums, but nothing swayed them. In the end, it was Grandma who comforted me. She held my hands and told me she didn't want to be a burden. We both cried as I helped pack her belongings. When my parents dropped her off, they almost looked relieved. That's when I decided I was done. Done with trying to be part of a family that didn't want me. From that point on, I visited Grandma every day. When I wasn't with her, I was at the library or a friend's house, anything to avoid being home. I ate dinner early, finished my homework, and went to bed before my parents returned from work. It was clear I was just a guest in my own home, and that was fine by me. Jenna, on the other hand, was falling apart. She got involved with the wrong crowd, stopped caring about school and my parents. They started hovering over her every move. My mom practically turned Jenna into her full-time project, which only made the screaming matches at home worse. It was as if all their energy went into fixing Jenna, while I faded further into the background. Our lives took another hit when Mom lost her job. With money tight, they brought Grandma back home because they couldn't afford the senior home fees anymore. I was thrilled to have her back, but the atmosphere in our house was suffocating. The tension, the arguing, the unspoken resentments, it all wore her down. One night, Grandma fell seriously ill again. I stayed up with her, listening to stories of her youth, of the adventures she'd had, the challenges she'd overcome. She smiled, gave me her gold necklace, and whispered that I was a wonderful human being. That night, she passed away quietly in her sleep. I was shattered. At her wake, I wore the gold necklace she gave me, standing quietly in the corner. Jenna stood beside me, pretending to cry for attention. I tried to keep my head down, but then Jenna noticed the necklace. Her eyes narrowed, and she demanded to know where I got it. I told her to mind her business, but she grabbed my wrist and yanked at the necklace. My dad, seeing the commotion, asked us to step outside. I could barely process his words when he accused me of stealing it. I told him Grandma had given it to me, but he didn't believe me. Jenna smirked and claimed she deserved the necklace because she was the older one. Dad demanded I hand over the necklace. I refused. His eyes darkened, and he said, "Either give me the necklace or leave." So I left. I walked home alone, tears blurring my vision, knowing that my family had officially chosen Jenna over me. When they returned home, the shouting began. They called me selfish, ungrateful, a mistake. I finally snapped. I told them I couldn't wait to leave their house forever. After that night, I cut myself off emotionally. I got a part-time job, paid for my share of groceries, and stayed out of their way. Life went on. Jenna spiraled further, and my parents clung to her, desperate to fix their golden child. Meanwhile, I thrived. I kept my head down, worked hard, and focused on my future. But the real betrayal was yet to come. Things at home were like a delicate truce, where everyone pretended everything was fine while resentment simmered beneath the surface. I stayed out of their way, kept my head down, and focused on my studies. The library was my second home, and my part-time job gave me enough independence to avoid relying on my parents. I was determined to make it out of this house, and no one was going to stop me. Jenna, though, was on a downward spiral. After bombing her final exams, she announced she was taking a gap year. She wanted to find herself or something equally vague. To my surprise, my parents agreed. They even funded her plan to travel for the year. I didn't question it. I was just relieved to have some peace and quiet. One night, as I was heading to the kitchen to get a glass of water, I overheard my parents talking in hushed voices. "She needs this break. After everything, she deserves a chance to reset," my mom said. "And she needs money for that." "We have the college fund Grandma left for both of them," Dad replied. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. "College fund?" I quietly leaned closer to listen. "We'll just use Mia's share for now," my mom whispered. "She'll be fine. She's smart enough to get a scholarship." It felt like the floor had vanished beneath me. They were planning to use my college fund, the money Grandma left for me, to send Jenna on her little journey of self-discovery. I couldn't believe it. I slipped back to my room, my mind racing. If I hadn't overheard them, I might have lost everything. That money was my ticket out of this life, and they were just going to give it away. To Jenna, because she needed it more. I didn't confront them right away. I needed a plan. I threw myself into schoolwork, focused on getting top grades, and pushed myself harder than ever. If they wanted to bet against me, fine. I'd prove them wrong. That year was brutal. I barely spoke to my parents. I avoided Jenna's drama, though I heard rumors that her travels weren't going as planned. Drugs, bad choices, mental breakdowns. Nothing my parents ever talked about, of course. In their eyes, Jenna was still perfect, just going through a rough patch. Meanwhile, I was excelling. My grades were top-notch, and I'd been nominated for valedictorian. The library visits, the late-night study sessions, all of it was paying off. I felt a spark of hope, something I hadn't felt in a long time. When graduation day came, I saw my parents in the crowd, smiling like we were the happiest family in the world. They acted proud, as if they'd supported me all along. I played along, wore a smile, and gave my speech. For a few hours, I pretended everything was normal. But normal was an illusion. A week later, I got the email I'd been waiting for. I was accepted into my dream university. The relief was overwhelming. I cried in my room for an hour before heading downstairs to share the news. As I reached the living room, I saw Jenna. She was back from her travels, sitting on the couch, tears streaming down her face. My parents hovered around her, worried and whispering. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice hesitant. Dad looked up, his face drawn. "Jenna didn't get into her preferred college, again." The air felt heavy, like all the energy had been sucked out of the room. I hesitated, my acceptance letter clutched in my hand. This wasn't the time to celebrate my success, not with the storm cloud of Jenna's failure hanging over everything. I quietly turned around and went back to my room. A few days passed, and I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I had to pay the admission fee to secure my spot. So I decided to ask my parents about the college fund directly. Maybe they'd see reason. "Can we talk?" I asked them one evening. They nodded, looking wary. "I got into my university," I said, my voice steady. "I need to use the college fund Grandma left me." They exchanged glances. Mom smiled weakly. "Congratulations, Mia, but what college fund?" I stared at them, my jaw tightening. "I overheard you talking about it. The money Grandma left for both of us. You were planning to use my share for Jenna's travels." Their faces froze. Dad sighed, rubbing his temples. We didn't think you'd need it, Mia. You're smart. You can get a scholarship. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So, because I'm responsible, I don't deserve the money Grandma left for me, but Jenna does? She's going through a tough time, Mom said, her voice pleading. She needs help to get back on her feet. And I don't? My voice cracked. I fought to keep my composure. That money was mine. You had no right to use it for her. Dad's expression hardened. We're doing what's best for the family. Jenna can start a business. It'll help her get back on track. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. You're stealing my future to give her another chance she doesn't even deserve. They didn't deny it. They just sat there, silent. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I'm going to a lawyer if I have to. I'll fight for what Grandma left me. They looked stunned. For once, I wasn't the quiet, obedient daughter. I was someone who would fight back. Before I could retreat to my room, Jenna stormed in, eyes wild. You're such a selfish brat, she hissed. Why can't you just give me the money? I need it. It's not your money, I snapped. Maybe if you faced reality for once, you'd understand. Her eyes blazed, and before I knew it, she shoved me hard. My back hit the wall, pain shooting up my spine. The thud must have been loud because my parents rushed in. They pulled Jenna back, leaving me on the floor. Mom glanced at me briefly, but then she turned all her attention to Jenna. I picked myself up, heart pounding. No first aid, no apology. Just them, fussing over Jenna. Like always, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and left the house. Seeking shelter at a friend's place. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them take anything else from me. Not my future, not my dignity. I had a plan. I stayed at my friend's house for a few days, giving myself space to breathe and think. The anger inside me simmered, but more than anything, I felt a deep sadness, like an anchor pulling me down. My family, the people who were supposed to have my back, had betrayed me over and over. And now, they were ready to strip away the one thing I had left, my future. But I wasn't going to let them win. On the third night, I went home. My parents barely acknowledged me, and Jenna didn't even look my way. It was like I was a ghost in my own house. That was fine. I didn't need their approval anymore. I waited until after dinner to confront them. They were sitting in the living room, Dad scrolling through his phone, Mom knitting like nothing was wrong. I need to know your final decision about the college fund, I said, my voice steady. They exchanged that look, the one they always shared when they were about to make a decision I wouldn't like. We've decided the money will go to Jenna, Dad said. She needs it more right now. A numbness settled over me. I wasn't even surprised. So, that's it? You're really stealing my future to give her another chance? Dad's jaw tightened. We're not stealing. We're helping your sister. You know what? I said, my voice cold. Fine, go ahead. But just know that I won't forget this. I turned to leave, my hands shaking with suppressed rage. That's when Mom spoke up, her voice careful, almost gentle. We want to throw a party for you both, to celebrate your graduation and Jenna's new business. A bitter laugh escaped me. A party? Really? After everything, you want to pretend we're one big happy family? It'll help Jenna make connections, Dad said. And it's a way to show we're proud of you too. I clenched my fists so hard my nails bit into my palms. I didn't believe their fake smiles, their hollow words. But an idea sparked in the back of my mind. A plan. I took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, I'll go along with it. They seemed relieved, thinking I'd finally fallen back into line. But they had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I knocked on Jenna's door. She opened it, her eyes bloodshot, her mood sour. What do you want? She muttered. I want to help with your business presentation, I said, forcing a smile. You need this to work, right? She blinked at me, suspicious. Why would you help me? I shrugged. Because if this is what Mom and Dad want, I might as well make it look good. She paused, then rolled her eyes. Fine, but don't screw it up. Over the next few days, I worked on the presentation. I sat with Jenna as she described her vague, half-baked ideas for a business. She couldn't focus for more than 5 minutes, and everything she said made it painfully clear she had no clue what she was doing. But I took her disjointed thoughts and stitched them together into something that at least sounded professional. When I finished, Jenna barely looked at me. "Guess you're not completely useless," she said, tossing the flash drive onto her desk. I swallowed my anger. "You're welcome." The night of the party arrived. The house was decorated with balloons and banners, and a big screen was set up for the presentation. People filled the living room. Neighbors, family friends, and some of Dad's business contacts. Everyone was smiling, drinking, and chatting about how wonderful it was to see the family supporting each other. I stood off to the side, feeling like an outsider at my own celebration. Dad clinked a glass to get everyone's attention. "Thank you all for coming tonight. We're so proud of both our daughters, Jenna, who's starting her own business, and Mia, who's graduating at the top of her class." People clapped politely. I forced a smile. The necklace Grandma gave me cool against my skin, reminding me why I was here. "Now," Dad continued, "Mia has prepared a video to introduce Jenna's business. Let's all give it our attention." He gestured for me to play the video. I walked to the laptop, my heart pounding. I took a deep breath and hit play. The video started just as expected, a nice, polished introduction to Jenna's business plan. She smiled on screen, talking confidently about her future. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then comma. The screen shifted. A recording of my parents' conversation began to play. Their voices echoed through the room. "We'll just use Mia's share for now. She'll be fine. She's smart enough to get a scholarship." My mom's voice followed, shaky but clear. "She doesn't need it as much as Jenna does." The room fell silent. My father's face turned red as he lunged for the laptop, but I stepped in his path, blocking him. The recording continued. Their reasons, their excuses, their betrayal, all of it played out for everyone to hear. When the video ended, I spoke into the stunned silence. "This is my family. They stole my college fund to give Jenna another chance. They've always favored her, no matter what it cost me." Whispers rippled through the crowd. My father's face was a mask of fury. Jenna was crying, real tears this time, while my mom stood frozen, her face pale. "I won't let them take my future," I said. "Not anymore." With that, I shut the laptop and walked out of the room. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding, but I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. I went to my room and started packing. I couldn't stay here anymore. Not after this. As I zipped up my bag, my phone buzzed. A notification from social media. My dad had posted something on my wall. I clicked it, dread pooling in my stomach. He'd twisted the story, calling me ungrateful, blaming me for Grandma's death, accusing me of ruining the family. My phone exploded with messages from relatives, calling me names, telling me I'd gone too far. For a moment, doubt crept in. Had I made things worse? Was I really the villain here? But then I remembered everything. The lies, the betrayal, the loneliness. No comma, I wasn't the villain. I was just finally standing up for myself. And I wasn't going to stop now. I left the house that night, my bag over my shoulder, and my heart heavy with a strange mix of anger and relief. The darkness outside felt more welcoming than the walls of my own home. I walked to my Aunt Linda's house, the only person in the family who ever really saw me. She opened the door, her face etched with concern. "Mia, what happened?" she asked, pulling me into a hug. I took a shaky breath. "They took everything from me, Aunt Linda. My college fund, my trust, everything." Her arms tightened around me. "You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out." We sat at her kitchen table as I told her everything. The stolen college fund, the betrayal, the video, and my father's twisted post. I showed her the messages from relatives, the cruel words piling up like bricks on my chest. "They're making me out to be the villain," I whispered. She shook her head. "They're wrong. You did what you had to do to protect yourself." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of it all pressing down on me. Then Aunt Linda looked me in the eye. "We need to talk to a lawyer." I nodded. I wasn't going to back down now. The next morning, we met with a lawyer. He listened carefully as I explained everything. The inheritance, the stolen college fund, the will Grandma left us. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "You have a strong case," he said. "The money left for you was intended for your education. Your parents had no right to use it for anything else." A surge of hope filled my chest. For the first time, it felt like there was a way out of this mess. "We can try to settle this out of court," he continued. "But if they refuse, we'll take it to court. You'll get what's rightfully yours." Aunt Linda squeezed my hand. "You're not alone in this, Mia. We'll fight together." I felt a flicker of strength. For so long, I'd been fighting alone, but now I had someone on my side. Later that day, I called my father. My hands trembled as the phone rang, but I steadied myself. He picked up, his voice cold. "What do you want?" "I want Grandma's will," I said. "I want to see it for myself." He laughed bitterly. "You think you can threaten us?" "I'm not threatening," I replied calmly. "But if you don't show me the will, I'll take this to court." There was a pause. Then his tone shifted, full of reluctant resignation. "Fine. We'll meet with the lawyers." When I hung up, my heart was pounding, but I felt a sense of purpose. The girl who used to quietly accept every injustice was gone. I was ready to fight. A week later, I found myself sitting in a cold, sterile office facing my parents. Aunt Linda sat beside me, her presence a steady anchor. My parents looked tired, my mother's eyes red, my father's jaw clenched. Jenna was there too, fidgeting in her seat, her eyes darting around like she was trapped. The lawyer handed me a copy of the will. My hands shook slightly as I read the words. Grandma had left the college funds for both Jenna and me to be used strictly for our education. The money was meant to be split evenly unless there was a legitimate need to use it for necessities. My father's voice broke the silence. "We thought we were doing what was best." I looked up at him, my eyes burning. "Best for who? Certainly not for me." He didn't answer. Mom stared at the table, her shoulders slumped. "We want to settle this quietly," he said finally. "No court, no drama." I met Aunt Linda's gaze and she nodded. As long as Mia gets what she's owed. The agreement was made. I'd get my share of the inheritance when I turned 18, just a few weeks away. It wasn't justice, not really, but it was enough. As we stood to leave, I turned to Jenna. She wouldn't meet my eyes. For once, she looked small, lost. "You did this to yourself," I said softly. Her lips trembled, but she didn't say a word. That night, Aunt Linda and I sat in her living room, sipping hot chocolate. The weight on my chest felt lighter, though not completely gone. The scars of betrayal didn't heal overnight. "I'm proud of you, Mia," she said. "You stood up for yourself." I nodded, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. "I just wish it didn't have to be like this." "Sometimes the truth has to tear things apart before it can heal," she said gently. I clutched Grandma's necklace, the cool metal grounding me. I missed her more than ever, but I knew she'd be proud of me too. A few days later, I got a call from Jenna. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but something made me answer. "Hey," she said, her voice shaky. "What do you want, Jenna?" I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything." A wave of emotion crashed over me, but I kept my voice steady. "It's a little late for that." "I know," she said. "I messed up. Mom and Dad messed up, but maybe we can fix it." I closed my eyes, the pain and anger swirling inside me. "I don't know if we can." She didn't argue. "I understand. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, full of things left unsaid. Finally, I whispered, "I hope you figure things out, Jenna." And then, I hung up. As I lay in bed that night, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe forgiveness would come someday. Maybe not. But for now, I was free. Free to build a future that was mine. I closed my eyes, holding Grandma's necklace close. Her strength was in me. And I knew I was going to be okay. The days after the meeting with my parents felt surreal. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next betrayal. The promise of the inheritance hung just a few weeks away, and the relief of knowing my future was still intact settled into my bones. Aunt Linda's house felt like home now, calm, safe, and filled with quiet understanding. I still hadn't returned to my parents' house. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I ever would. There was too much damage, too many wounds that hadn't even begun to heal. But I also knew that cutting ties completely wasn't what I wanted. I just needed space. Time to figure out what life looked like without constantly fighting for my place in it. One morning, I received an email confirming my scholarship had been approved. The university had taken my situation into account and offered me additional aid. A weight I didn't even realize I was carrying lifted off my shoulders. I didn't have to rely on the inheritance alone. I was free to use it to build my life, to give myself opportunities I never thought possible. When I told Aunt Linda, she hugged me tight. "See? Hard work pays off. You earned this, Mia." Her words settled in my heart. For so long, I'd questioned if I was worth anything, if my accomplishments mattered to anyone but me. Now, I knew they did. Even if my parents never saw me, I saw myself. And that was enough. A week before my 18th birthday, my phone buzzed with a message from my dad. "Dad, please come home. We need to talk." I stared at the screen, my chest tight. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to stay safe in the cocoon I'd built for myself. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the girl who just wanted to be loved, knew I needed to face this. Aunt Linda nodded when I told her. "I'll be here no matter what happens." Taking a deep breath, I went back to the house I used to call home. The door opened, and my mom stood there, eyes red, hands wringing the hem of her shirt. "Mia?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I walked inside, my steps careful, guarded. My dad was sitting on the couch, his face worn and weary. Jenna wasn't there. The silence felt like a fragile glass between us. "Where's Jenna?" I asked quietly. "She's in rehab," Dad said, his voice rough. We realized we let her spiral too far." Mom nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We didn't see what was happening, Mia. We were so focused on saving her that we lost you." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "You didn't just lose me, you pushed me away." My dad flinched, the truth of my words hitting him like a slap. "We thought we were doing the right thing. We were wrong." I folded my arms, the weight of everything pressing down on me. "You stole my future for Jenna. You made me feel like I didn't matter." Mom's sobs grew louder. "We know, and we're so sorry. We can't take back what we did, but we want to try to fix things, if you'll let us." Their apologies hung in the air, fragile and uncertain. For a moment I wanted to scream, to unleash every bit of hurt they'd ever caused, but all I felt was exhaustion. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said honestly. "Not yet, maybe not ever." Dad nodded, his eyes glistening. "We understand, but we want to try." It wasn't perfect, it wasn't a grand reconciliation, but it was a start. I left the house with a hollow feeling in my chest, a mix of sadness and something that felt like hope. They wanted to fix things, but I didn't know if I could let them back in. Not fully. "Not yet." Aunt Linda was waiting for me when I returned. "How did it go?" I shrugged. "They apologized. They want to try again." She studied my face. "And what do you want?" I sighed. "I want to move forward. I want to live my life. And maybe one day I'll let them be part of it." She smiled softly. "That's a good place to start." On my 18th birthday, I officially received my inheritance. The money was more than enough for college and then some. Grandma had left me more than just funds. She'd left me the freedom to build a future on my own terms. That night, I sat in Aunt Linda's living room, the gold necklace from Grandma resting against my skin. I opened the small wooden box Grandma had left me. Inside were handwritten notes, journals, and photos from her youth. Stories of her life, her struggles, her dreams. She'd been a fighter too, carving out her place in the world when no one believed in her. I felt her strength flowing through me. One note caught my eye. The paper was faded, the ink slightly smudged. Mia, "You are stronger than you know. Don't let anyone steal your light. Live boldly, love fiercely, and never forget your worth. With all my love, Grandma. Tears blurred my vision. She believed in me when no one else did. And now, I believed in myself. I packed my bags for college with a sense of purpose. Aunt Linda drove me to the bus station, her eyes shimmering with pride. "Go out there and show them what you're made of." I hugged her tightly. "Thank you for everything." As the bus pulled away, I watched the town shrink behind me, the weight of the past slowly lifting. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was free to live it. Grandma's necklace sat warm against my collarbone, her love a constant reminder. No matter what came next, I was ready.